All right, welcome and good afternoon, attendees. Thank you for attending the InfoSeCon 2020, and definitely thank you for handling this with us and dealing with the virtual aspect of it. We are here with Nia Luckey. She is a cybersecurity expert, and she is going to be presenting to us Not Another Framework, Cutting Through the Noise. I'm super excited to watch this with you guys because I actually work with Nia, so this is really fun for me. Nia works at Cisco, and she is a SOC manager. Is that your official title, Nia?
Yes.
All right, awesome. We will ask you guys to remain on mute through the duration. If you have a pressing question, please drop it in the chat and Nia will address it at the next pause. And then at the end of the presentation, it will be open for open conversation and I will put all of you on unmuted. All right, go ahead, Nia.
Well, first of all, thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy Fridays and your weeks for coming to hear me present part 2 of Not Another Framework, Cutting Through the Noise. So the first one, in case you weren't able to catch it, is live on YouTube, and it was for ISSA Triads summit that they put on earlier in the spring. So after the great amount of feedback from all of the attendees during that conference, I wanted to do another cut, to do a deeper dive. Okay, so what now? And kind of bring that conversation to the table and share with you guys a little bit of the bigger strategy that I'm bringing to my project for US public sector, kind of surrounding security and operations and how to walk that through, right? And what do we do now? But before I get too deep into that, let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know, I am just a SOC manager at Cisco, right? I didn't start there. Where I got my start was 13 years ago, well, probably closer to 16 now. And I did 13 years as an Army veteran working in ground air radios. I'm also a mother of 3. I have a 15-year-old all the way down to a 4-year-old, and they keep me very, very busy. But in between taking care of them and taking care of my work, which I'm very passionate about, I find time to take care of myself. So I am an avid 5K and marathon runner. I'm currently trying to tackle a 490-mile challenge before New Year's. So wish me luck on that. In my downtime in a previous life, I'm also an artist and a poet, published in both areas, but no art to be sold just around my house. Also take time to be an active leader and mentor in the cyber community space, very actively enrolled with the veteran community here at Fort Bragg. I am the president and Eastern Carolina chapter lead for 2 other sister nonprofits. So ISSA Fayetteville Fort Bragg is the first, and I am the current standing president of that chapter. And I am the Eastern Carolina chapter lead for women's cybersecurity, cyberjitsu, here on the East Coast alongside our regional director, Crystal Williams. This is not my first career, so as you can see, this is my second, but I am really, really happy about it because for the first time, my passion is what I do. And so therefore it doesn't feel like work. Yes, some days are really, really busy and really, really draining, but I get so much out of it. And the biggest reason is when I do something fruitful and I put it hours and hours of work into it, a lot of times presentations like this are the byproduct and I get to share it with people like you. So again, deep appreciation for you guys taking the time to come kind of dial in and listen to what I have to say about this. So like I said, this is part 2. I didn't want to go too deep into what I covered in part 1, which was more the back history of how I got to where I am with an innovative, creative, like non-traditional approach, right? So what I want to do now is I want to show a little bit of how you do that with all of the security frameworks, network frameworks, operations frameworks that are out there. And this slide is a great example of that, right? You're not just looking at security frameworks here. Yes, primarily you are, but there are some other more management driven frameworks on the screen in front of you, right? So what do we do with that? That's a lot, right? And what I've learned, unfortunately, is in the meeting room, this is the noise. This is the chatter. This is the chaos. This is the, well, why can't we use this version? It works really well when there's a newer version out there. Or, hey, that's a security framework, but we don't like security because that's a scary word. What framework would be better suited? Or that's just a DoD specific framework. So why are we using that? Why aren't we using the federal version? And so a little bit of that, right? So you have a lot of NIST on the slide in front of you, but the federal version of that is FedRAMP, right? So I know, especially for me, when I started on this journey with Cisco 2 years ago, that was the biggest disconnect in my brain was, okay, here's another framework. I have no idea what the heck that means. But when I actually started to dive into it and peel it back, it was very similar to NIST, which I had a very comfortable background in because I contracted for Fort Bragg for 2 years before coming, up to Cisco and RTP. But what made it even better was my ability to take the two and not say this one's better, this one's not, we should use this. No, no, no. It was taking the two and saying, okay, they're actually really alike with a less than 5% difference at the time. Now, the templates for both have currently updated. So we're now on NIST 853 revision 5, right? But in a lot of the stuff we're using, revision 4 is still in play the same way the previous version of FedRAMP still in play, right? So it's kind of, now what do we do, right? Do we use the most current? Do we get rid of the old? What do we do with that? You don't have to. You don't necessarily have to choose. And that's really what this talk is about, how to be that voice at the table that can say at the end of the day, don't get rid of what we have, especially if there's solid audit results and success behind that. Use that, leverage the good points, but tie it into what's new, what's current, so that as an industry and as a service provider to our customers, we are growing with them and we are staying relevant in our space. And ultimately, why, Cisco is the #1 place to work in the world, but I am biased. So, but where do you start, right? That's a lot. What I just said, there's a lot of context there, and it can get very overwhelming, especially for executive leaderships or managers in any capacity. It's everybody has a good idea and everybody's got a different start point, and it's okay. Well, let's break it down very simply. Internally, what do we have that is currently being used by the company and our customers? So, where are you? That's a good question. That's a good start point. Where are we currently right now? And then the next question is externally, are there any other additional ones that we're not currently using that they are? Right? Or that they are now required to use, right? So AWS Cloud that introduced a lot of outside services to FedRAMP, FedRAMP Moderate, FedRAMP IL 4, IL 5, and all the way up and through IL 6 and 7, right? But in order to remain compliant, but to keep their ability to operate within that cloud space, they had to become compliant almost overnight, right? It's not, oh, you have a year. It's more like you have 6 months, and better yet, tighten that down to 3 months if you really want to continue to stay connected and be able to not lose any services that are currently already in play. Um, and then for me, the most important third question is what is what is security specific and what isn't, right? So going back to what I said on the previous slide, what is a management framework? What is a security framework? What is a compliance framework? Because they're not all the same. But getting that clear line of sight, but mainly so that you can simply raise that to your managers and your executive leadership just to have that conversation so they can develop an appreciation for where we are and how long it might take for us to get to where we need to be. Realistic timelines is what you want to create instead of a state of panic and discord and disruption that may be very impactful to the services you're providing. And there are so many examples of this, right? So you have risk management framework, you have security assessment framework. So one is NIST, and then the other one is FedRAMP. You have ITIL, you have versions 4, and you have version 3, right? So it's not saying 3 is deprecated, get rid of it. There's a lot of good context there, but version 4 is what is out there. It is what is relevant. It's what you should be building towards, right? So, and right below that, we're going from standard threat modeling, and we're actually trying to build towards NIST zero trust for those of us that have DoD based customers. That's the big vision. When I look at Cisco holistically, for example, our CMS SOC and our services that are our managed services in the private sector arena, they're already modeled to this. And public sector, we need to build to that. So it's saying take your trust, like your threat modeling, take all of those conversations, but we need to start having the ones to work towards zero trust, right? And how do you do that? You can leverage other kill chains and other methodologies like the Lockheed Martin kill chain, cyber kill chain, which has been recently not replaced. Again, I need people to just take a pause and realize we're not replacing, we're just building upon, right? You're using them as stepping stones to get to your next level, to the next goal, to the next whatever that looks like. And so the step beyond kill chain is the MITRE attack framework, which is amazing, but it is so drastically different in comparison to the cyber kill chain that it could be like, oh my God, we're starting over. When in reality, you can lean on persons like myself or the team that I support, and we can help drive the context and the why behind how A and B can equal C instead of just getting rid of A and starting over from scratch with nothing for B to give you C. Because the overall goal, right, is to streamline, innovate, and automate. When it comes to cybersecurity, this is what we're having to do every single day so that we can stay not only relevant, but we can stay at the same pace as our adversaries, as our attackers, as the hackers that are out there, right? So, and again, very powerful, simplistic slide, but there are over 250 different cybersecurity frameworks out there, right? There are several different security life cycles. You have the CSDL, Cisco has a great version of that. You have the SDLC, which is the RMF version, the NIST version of what security development lifecycle should be or could be, or what their standard is. And then you have secure SDLC, right? So, and there's so many more. But again, noise, right? It's a lot of chatter, it's a lot of opinions, it's a lot of different certifications, it's a lot of, oh my goodness, what do we do? Because what that equates to is you have over 1,000 unique security controls and enhancements attached to that, but that spans across 19 now standard security control families, right? That's a lot. And yes, that new one, it used to be 18, it's 19 now, is cloud. Cloud can be disruptive when you don't have the right strategy in place and you're not leaning on the persons in a team, in a collective that may have the answers. It's no longer a conversation of, well, Nia knows best because she has insert all these certifications or this criteria or, this background. It's saying, hey, my specialty is operations management and I don't know a whole lot about security. Maybe let me have a conversation with Nia and let's figure out where our gaps are so that we can build a holistic strategy moving forward for overall success, right? You again, you want to build that to basic SIM stabilization and access control. You want to build that further into a zero trust model that works because you're literally building ACLs on a host based, not focusing on the boundary and bringing it all together there. So it's and those are concepts that aren't, unless you are deep into security or cybersecurity, that aren't so common. They're not something that somebody on a traditional, IT networking path, being a knock analyst, is going to just learn unless they have a passion for security or compliance in the background. And vice versa, like for somebody like me, network operations, that's not something that is just going to come naturally to me because I work in a SOC. They're two different environments. And so, therefore, the operations to drive the way that business runs is different. Is it drastically different? No, but it is at the end of the day holistically a conversation because if we're not collaborating, we can't move forward together. And so, then our service and the services we provide at the end of the day to the customer, the experience may not always be seamless, or behind the scenes, when you pull back the curtain, there's discord and there's, you know, suspenses and timelines and deliverables that are slipping because it might seem overwhelming that to become compliant or to stay compliant or to, renew an authority to operate or to connect or any of those things are disrupted because of new ideas or, just overall new requirements, right? So, but at the end of the day, there's a way to do it. And that's what brings me to probably my favorite question. So what, right? So what is the what, right? Every framework has core components. That's the so what, right? It's no longer a question of threat versus risk. It's a question and just a statement of build and repair trust through the security frameworks or through the frameworks you are using that are applicable to the project you're working on and that you're supporting, right? And then ultimately choose what fits the project. Don't force it, right? If you come in and you're strategy minded and you have a really robust background in kind of building this and being successful and it's repeatable, share that. Don't harbor it inside and get frustrated and feel like it's just your job to solution it. Even if it is being bold and saying, hey, look, this framework no longer fits because we've evolved, just find the tactful way to communicate it, because the reality is there are so many options out there that it is about we can almost tailor it, right? We can pick, we can say, okay, cool. NIST applies, FedRAMP applies, HIPAA doesn't apply because we don't process this type of data, right? CIS applies. What does, what doesn't? PCI doesn't apply to my project. So I'm obviously not going to use or suggest the use of that framework. But it's having the knowledge that I didn't have that going into this. I went out and I did research because that's a little bit of what I get paid to do is to innovate, right? So we can automate. But in order to do that, right, you're building strategy. You're saying, okay, management, this is how we go from A to Z. And yes, it looks like a lot of work, looks like a lot of hard work, but that's why we get paid at the end of the day. And if we can be passionate about it and make it make sense, then at least to me, it doesn't feel like work and it's not daunting. And I can still get excited about it, even if it is looking at a spreadsheet that makes me go cross eyed by the end of the week. But it brings me to this point. Never just take a punt on your strategy. If you feel like you don't have that answer, which I don't always have that answer, it's leaning on the people that you are surrounded with and saying, okay, if I ever get to this point where it feels like I'm taking a punt or I'm making a guess, maybe there's a conversation I can be having. Maybe there is a smarter person I could be leaning on. Right. And so I take a little bit of pause here and give, a huge shout out to ISSA Raleigh 1 for bringing us InfoSeCon virtually 2020. But that's a huge way as to how I got to where I am is it gave me this immense network of people, and not just people but professionals that are smarter than me and are extremely talented and genuine but equally passionate about what we do. And it's networking literally at its finest, right? But it's also saying, hey, it's safe to not have all the answers, but here's some people that might. And so if I ever get in a point where I feel like I am punting a little bit, right? I have a phone a friend. I have somebody I can call and say, hey, do you have 30 minutes? I'm having this idea. I don't know if it's worth it. Or, hey, I hit a blocker on this project and I'm not sure how to get through it, but I have to present something to management tomorrow, right? That's what nonprofits like ISSA, WSC, and so many others bring to our industry. Where I'm going to tell you right now, when I transitioned out of the Army, I was terrified because I wanted cybersecurity so bad. I wanted to be in this industry because I knew I had value and passion to bring to the table. Just didn't know how to get there. Well, this is how I got there. is ISSA. And then through that, through what I was able to see and experience Raleigh doing, I brought it to Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, and I helped stand up our chapter here so that I could give these types of presentations to our local community colleges, to professionals like you, right? To the newest of the new in terms of students, right? Some of these students are still in high school that are going for their associate's degree, or they're just interested, right? Or to the career transition, right? Like I said, this is my second career. I made a pivot at 32 years old. That was terrifying, right? But it's, again, you don't take a punt, you build that strategy out, right? So it's always just kind of been a baked in mentality for me, but that's why that quote is right there on your screen. But how is that relevant to what we're talking about? Well, it's relevant because in that not wanting to take a punt on a huge cybersecurity strategy, right? I went onto Google, which, okay, I know it's like a dark hole. But what I found was almost an invaluable resource. And that link is where I found it. This website, what it brings to the table is the ability to say, I want to build out a template that is actually tailored to everything that applies to the project I'm working on. So, what it gave me the ability to do was click and say, okay, all right, NIST, you apply. CSF, you apply. All right, you know what? I do want CIS version 7 in there. I also want FedRAMP moderate in there. I want FedRAMP IL5 in there. I want NIST 853, right? Revision 4, but I want it specified and tailored to a NOC, to a network operations center, right? And I got to pick and choose what I wanted across the entire workbook, and it was able to produce it for me. I didn't have to put it together by myself. And the other great thing about this website is other companies are using it, which speaks to the success of just something simple and free. It's not expensive. Did it take a little bit of time? Did it take a little bit of tweaking? Absolutely. But that free resource to me is invaluable, especially when I go on that website and I see other companies that are actually very successful in turning it as a profit for their customers. Because what it allows you to do is you take this, you merge it together there. Because you're taking tactical plus operations and strategic like thought processes and you're merging them together, the byproduct of that is natural maturity modeling, which to me is the ultimate goal right now on any project in our space of cybersecurity. That's the additional so what sweetener. It's like, okay, cool, you did all this stuff. What does that even mean? And why is it important to me? Why it's important is because now you can actually show through metrics how mature your network operations center is, how mature your program is, how secure are you, right? You can literally take third-party audit results, plug them into this, and give your senior leadership, your executive leadership, a percentage of improvement or a percentage of area of growth of where you need to improve, right? So again, going back a couple of slides, building and repairing that trust through the frameworks, right? So it's not threat versus risk. It's not these combative, ideologies. It's build and repair and collaborate, just like that slide shows. It's showing you can take people, processes, and technology, plus security and privacy and compliance, and merge them together to a holistic view to build to something much bigger and better at the end of the day. So, and this one is a bit of a busy slide, but it's so true because you're able to take privacy by design, security by design, and then you're able to take things like ITIL, which is right on the side, and you're able to use that as almost the glue, right, to set roadmaps and drive improvement through quarterly scheduling over time so that it is aware of your team's cycles, their capacity, and you're able to show like, hey, we were only able to dedicate maybe 10% of our time towards this one area that was, an at risk on the last audit. but it's still showing that improvement by leveraging the management framework of ITIL, but you're combining it with the other things that are equally important to those of us that are more compliance GRC driven, security driven, or privacy driven. You no longer have to choose. It brings it together. And my absolute favorite part of that is then you can take it a step further. You can say, okay, this is a lot of data. You just aggregated, you essentially did what a SIM does with logs, right? So why is that important to me? Well, why it's important is because, and again, not another eye chart, which this one is a little bit about, right? It gets busy, right? But when you're looking at it and you're looking at the data, this is kind of what it looks like. And you don't, instead of presenting something like this, let's crosswalk this into operations. Let's crosswalk this through up into what a RACI looks like, right? A responsibility and accountability metric of, okay, at the end of the day, what is your SOC manager responsible for? What is your NOC manager responsible for? What are all users responsible for, right? And so the way you do that is you take these free resources that are out there, but you do have to put in a little bit of work and effort. And that's where I get really excited. Get to roll up your sleeves a little bit and think outside the box, and you get to innovate on something that's already free. And so this is where I'm going to give a shout out to my moderator, Allison, because yes, we are coworkers, but what were we able to do? We stepped outside of the box. We looked at the whole thing and we said, you know what? ITIL is pretty great and Cisco uses it. And guess what? So do our customers. How do we integrate the two? And that's exactly what we did. We took the new principles of ITIL version 4 and we layered them in with the SCF domain so that it reads across. And so to us, this isn't an eye chart, but to my managers and my director for sure, this would be a little bit busy. But for me, that's as simple as saying, okay, look, this is where we're at, but this is where we can go. Because what this does is it takes this slide right in front of you, right here, and because I layered in EU GDPR, it breaks it directly into a responsibility metrics because it's built in by default because I got to build my template the way I wanted to, right? And so when I'm having conversations with my manager on, okay, Nia, as the SOC operations manager, what are you responsible for? Well, I find my name in purple and I pivot and everything, and I say, show me everything only this role is responsible for. And then what's not on this screen that's on this one is that. And so it does, it crosswalks. It directly correlates to, at the end of the day, what am I responsible for? But the greater thing, at least about this one, my favorite, absolute favorite part of how GDPR does this is it also breaks down into all users, but it goes all the way up to executive leadership. It holds everybody that is on a project or assigned to a project responsible, but for their specific areas. That way, when you are doing a third party audit, if you are having to go through a CCRI or anything like that on the DoD side, it's saying, okay, well, no, they don't want to talk to me as a stock manager. You need to put them in, in a conversation with your ISSM, your IAM, or you need to put them in a conversation with your CIO, CISO, ISSO, or nope, this is definitely a legal question. Let's pull in a legal representative to answer this question. That way you're getting the auditors the most honest upfront answer from the people that are doing the job, and you're not having to take a punt on the answer. So it's never taking a stab in the dark or, thinking, well, maybe I have this answer right. It's actually getting them to the right people when they have the question.
Nia, we have a question in Q&A.
Okay.
That is from Jesse Eversole. I think I'm saying that correctly. Jesse asks, as an auditor, when you look at an organization and given all these options, how would you look at the organizations you are auditing given the complexity?
Restate that.
As an auditor, when you look at an organization and given all of these options, how would you look at the organizations you're auditing given the complexity? I believe they mean if you're being audited with all of these at once, how does that work? What does that mean?
So what that means is what I challenge everybody to do is even if you're coming into it as an auditor, right? Or you know you're going into an audit, right? Is leverage this tool and what I'm suggesting here as an internal check mechanism. And additionally, if you're an auditor going in and you say, and you know that your organization, you know, through your Q&A, your ramp up, and then you're having to build out an ROE going into that audit, right? Find out what frameworks apply and then maybe try and net this out on the front end if they're not already handing something similar like this to you during those questions. So I know going into our most recent audit, there were months of conversations leading up into this, and we didn't have a tool like this. That's why we have one now. So I don't know if that answered a question, but what you're able to do when you go to this tool is you're able to say, okay, these ISO applies. Like I'm telling you right now, and I'll go back to that slide so that you guys can see it. That website, when you are tailoring your template, you can add ISO into it. You can add things that apply to one project that don't apply to another. So you're literally like, if you're coming at it as an auditor, you can build out different templates that are already tailored to the person or company organization you're auditing.
Jesse has a follow-up. I think to clarify,
Okay.
he, or sorry, she, maybe, I'm not sure. Jesse's could be either. How do you explain to an auditor that you're using a combo? So I guess on the side of if an auditor is popping in and you have this thing, you've created this beautiful matching thing that crosswalks all this stuff. Is that something you need to disclose to the auditor? Do they even care? How do you talk to them about what you did and how you made what you did?
Oh, that's amazing. So I know rapport is important with your auditors when you're building that. So a common language point would be security controls. So if you are leveraging a tool like this, start speaking to the security controls, right? But then show them how it already does the crosswalk internally. And if they want it tailored down a little bit different, because you did do an internal assessment, which some auditors might want, some don't. Like I know ours didn't because they want to come in and they want to get a raw cut. They don't want pre-planned answered already filled in. But if you're using this just as a metric of comparison, which is what I'm trying to suggest here, is you can say, okay, look, for FedRAMP aisle 5, you know, moderate, this security control applies, but on NIST 853 revision 4, it doesn't, then you can have a conversation. So that's where I find tools like this useful because it helps kind of explain away the gray area. Because for us, FedRAMP applied for this audit. FedRAMP does not apply for accreditation with some of our customers. They use NIST. So it's just, again, finding that common language. And if they say at the end of the day, hey, thanks, but no thanks, you still have it and you're still able to use it as an internal auditing tool.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that, Nia. I don't have any follow-up questions in Q&A right now. So
Okay.
moving on until more questions pop up or until you are ready for open discourse.
Yep. So let's pause on this one real quick though. So one of my favorite managers that I got to work with over the last 6 months said this to me once, and it really, really stuck with me. And I was like, but it made me laugh at the same time because there was a lot of validity in such a simple ask, right? And humor, which I always appreciate. Um, but it was more because slides like this, Excel sheets, workbooks like this or like this are really, really busy. And when you're presenting in a presentation to executive leadership or management or any levels higher than you, it can get, it's a lot and it can be overwhelming, right? So that's why I say use the frameworks and that's fine, but streamline it into a slide deck that speaks exactly to their ask. So if my management team said, okay, Nia, we see your tool, that's great. Use that to drive operations with these people, but we want to see the roles and we want to see the responsibilities. So their so what is very different than my original so what, right? So what you're able to do though, again, you're not starting over, but you're leveraging everything and all the hard work you've already put into it to streamline something a little bit more like this. This is something that's a little bit more palatable. It's not busy, it's simple, but it pulls from very, colorful, happy Excel sheets like this, right? But in my mind, right, if I'm briefing my director, he wants to know or she wants to know, okay, how do we apply that to every single project we have? Unless you have a singular project, right? How do we scale this? Right? What's the big picture? What is the impact? What is the business impact? How do we improve? How do we use it? Because if it's great and it works once, typically it's a repeatable like process. But that's where you get value. So what you do is you have a time, like at least for me, I had an opportunity to choose from what was in front of me and said, okay, across the entire portfolio, what roles would be make or break if we didn't have them? And that's where this comes into play. So I was able to streamline it. And I said, at the end of the day, if we are missing one of these roles, that is what I would consider to be a gap. Okay. And that is what they need to see. It's understanding in that moment that you don't have a name in an area, but also appreciate that somebody else that is on that chart is probably pulling up that slack too, right? So, and that drives a bigger question of just because we can, does it mean we should? So, because as a cybersecurity professional, right, there's a huge, lovely thing that I pull people back to constantly when it's a conversation about roles, and it's separation of duties, right? Which is a security concept. But unfortunately, in times like COVID or anything over the last 6 months has taught me is that we don't always have that luxury. And so dual hatting and bearing multiple roles, multiple hats, however you want to, put words around it, it's happening more and more. Just because one, we have a talent shortage, and two, we're in unprecedented times. I manage my team remotely. The team I support, most of us are remote. So I still need to be able to show at the end of the day to management, hey, the idea that you are missing an incident event manager could be a make or break because now you are dispersing this role across 2 or 3 people, and that doesn't scale over time. So, why is that important? And that's when you get to drive the bigger conversations. But I'm not showing them something that's going to make their brains go, oh my goodness, what am I looking at? What's the context? Way too busy, right? I am streamlining it. I am pulling it down to a talking point, 2 to 3 slides that speaks exactly to what their ask was. So, and you can do this for your technical side. You could do this for your management side. You could do this for your operations side. Those are my 3 favorite buckets. And those are your 3 slides. And guess what? Yes, there are people that are filling multiple roles. So I'll pick on myself really quick. I am the SOC manager. I'm also the security incident manager, incident event manager, right? So my name would be in 2 areas on what's in front of you, but I'm also a compliance manager, right? We don't have a single dedicated person to do that role. We have a team. So each organization might be a little bit different, but that's how it is ultimately on at least the team that I support, right? But that's not to say that the level above me doesn't have a dedicated ISSO, ISSM, or a separate team, CIO, dedicated to that as well, but from the tier above us, right? So this is giving at least my management team the ground floor, but then we could just go back to the slide before this one and say, okay, what is the level above us look like? Do we have those answers? And so on and so forth, right? And then help our partners when we start engaging with partner engagements between us and our customers. What should yours look like too? We'll use ours as a template. This is what it looks like, but it's not confusing. It's streamlined. It's simple. It's not busy. Whereas, like I said, this is a little busy, and so is this. So you're streamlining it to very just, I don't want to say oversimplified, but simplistic language or common language that they can understand and you can understand, but your team can also understand. And last but not least, so what's the point, Nia, right? Well, the point is when you have a tool like this, what big cybersecurity is building to is maturity modeling, right? And it has been for the last 3 years. 2017, I started hearing like compliance maturity modeling, or just any combination of letters that had to do with modeling out where your project is. So you have digital maturity, you have compliance maturity, you have organizational maturity, right? Find a maturity model that speaks to where you are. And that's the so what on this slide. It's taking that entire template and again, merging it into a bigger picture that management can use. So for us, we would want to tie and align to what our customers are using and asking of us, and that would be the CMMI or CMMC. And that's exactly what that website does too, is there's a center point, which is based on NIST CSF, and it gives you weighted scores for certain areas. And then you're just going to end up compiling that data and spitting out a metrics of where you are in terms of maturity. So before we were doing CMMI alignment, I took it upon myself to use another free resource, and I used the CREST maturity model to build out the maturity of our SOC for our Security Operations Center, just to show management where we were. But now I get to use that data and those data points and feed it directly into where we are today. So one I used over a year ago, but that's changed and that's shifted, and that's fine. I'm not getting rid of it. I'm not starting over. I'm finding the security points in the template that I built, and I am assessing it based on what it's showing me, and it ties directly in. But that's what I wanted to bring to you guys is, again, so something from a year ago that I never thought I could use. Well, now I can use it. It's not starting over, and it's tying in, and it's actually going to probably streamline our success and our ability to hit the deliverable faster because we already did the assessment.
Nia, we've got some questions in the Q&A.
All right.
So first and foremost, in your experience, how have development communities responded to these control requirements? The user is Venny, and he goes on to say that some security controls are challenging and time consuming to code, which becomes more expensive and then therefore inefficient in complex enterprises if they're solution team by team.
You are absolutely correct. And so what I suggest, especially for the hyper technical, like when you're coding security solutions, is lean on a tool that we use on the team that I'm a part of, and it's the Security Technical Implementation Guides. And there is a DoD version of this, and then there is also an open, there's Stig Viewer for more of the corporate side. But what it does is it says, okay, to meet this control, and it will walk you through code line by line of how to check to see if you're already doing it, or if not, it'll show you what to script so that you are doing it. And if you do come across a very complex one, then give that feedback to your leadership, like people like me, like Nia. I tried to implement this, it broke all of these things. I'm going to need 30 days. I'm going to need 60 days. Here's my phase plan, but eventually we'll get there. Is there a conversation about maybe we could put this on? So again, more DoD speak, but on the plan of actions of in milestones, is there any way to do that? Or is there any way that our ISSO or our compliance officer is willing to inherit the risk for now? And then we'll revisit this conversation at the 60-day mark. But you're not wrong. They do get complex. And unfortunately, a lot of them, especially when it involves the boundary or it involves specific hosts, it breaks things. And we know that, or at least I know that. And so if you don't have, a leadership team that is in the know like I am, it's just finding a way to have that conversation.
Okay, two things. So one, Vinny is asking if there can be a link provided to that resource you just gave. So if you can meet people in the lounge afterward and have that link available, that'd be great. Our next question is from anonymous attendee. Attendee says, I'm currently a SOC analyst. Would this be good for someone thinking about climbing the ladder to become a manager, or is it specific to somebody already in a management role?
Absolutely not. I think this is a tool that would be fantastic for anybody that's on the security or cybersecurity of any project, or if you are a NOC analyst and you're on the IT side and you want to get into this side and you want to start learning and playing around and seeing how the security frameworks align and tie into operations, yeah, I would raise my hand and say challenge accepted, because again, that's that self-study. So I'm a huge advocate of it's not a one size fits all. And if your passion's in it, then deep dive into it, ask the questions. I shared what I've been building out with the SOC team, with the security operations team that supports our bigger project for feedback, especially because if they hit a point where it's not making sense, then I feel like it is inherently my job to help it make sense.
All right, we don't have any additional questions inside of the Q&A right now. If you want to go ahead and close up and then save some time for the rest of the questions.
That's exactly what I was going to do. Awesome. So I know I kind of hit that really fast. An hour goes by really quick when you're giving, talks and you're passionate about what you're talking about. So I want to bring it back to all of you though. What is your passion? What makes sense to you, right? Which is a little bit of the question that was just asked of me, right? What skills and knowledge can you leverage? Who are your mentors? Are you networking? Are you going to conferences, which you are because you're dialed in listening to me right now? And by proxy, you're getting a little bit of a training session and you're not getting a sales pitch. So make it make sense. Make the content make sense to you. Please, I hope you learned something and you took value in this. And it reflects in the survey that you're supposed to give for my feedback. But bring it back to you. Use this. Take the slides. I'll put them on my LinkedIn, right? Use the resources. Use the links that are in the presentation that I shared. Start playing around with it. And ultimately, if you liked a little bit of what I said and you want to do a deeper dive, reach out. Like I said, I'm a mentor, but I'm always a mentee too. And I love creating new relationships and broadening my network. So I don't really have much else, Allison. I would like to open up the last 15 or so minutes to the audience and see if, there are any additional questions or
Okay,
feedback.
I will go ahead and start opening this up. I will say though, we have more attendees in this than I've seen all day long. So please no mass chaos, guys. If somebody else is talking, raise your hand, wait your turn. Also, please do go fill out the survey at the end of this and see Nia later in the lounge for any links you need from her, or find her and connect with her on LinkedIn, all right? Oh, one more thing. Unfortunately, I do have to close this chat on the hour, so we only have 12 and a half more minutes, okay?
Are they going to naturally unmute or is everybody just still muted?
They have to unmute themselves once I allow them to talk.
Okay,
It's very mechanical.
got it. I just ask because people, I see names popping up and I'm like, I don't know if they're
Yeah,
talking or not.
it's a thing, and there are a lot of people in here, so it's taking some time. Also, if you have an older version of Zoom, it will not let me allow you to talk. Just beware of that.
since we have crickets here, I wanted to ask the question is with regard to security controls. I mean, it's one thing to map them across all those documents.
Mhm.
What has been your experience in even getting them written down so that people actually have them wherever they come from, and then they follow them and keep them updated?
Ooh, that's a that's a loaded question, Jesse, but a good one. So, and the reason why I think it's a great question is now you're talking to a little bit of the why I took a month and a half to start building this out because we didn't have it. And so post audit, we were getting, where do we have these controls? Are they mapped to NIST? Are they only FedRAMP? Is it only in the SSP? Like all of these, like, again, noisy conversations. So I was like, okay, there's got to be an easier way. And so ultimately what my goal is to leverage something like this, and it could be a living workbook. Obviously by the time it's filled in, it's going to contain, you know, controlled unclassified information, which means it will have to be under like some type of multi-factor authentication in order to access, which I don't have a problem with, but it could be a single like source of truth. And then quarterly you're going in and you're reviewing and you're updating, not having to at the end of an audit go in and build something like this. So that's, I don't know if that directly answered your question, but that's my goal with this, is that we put the audit results in this and we're able to keep it moving forward into any future like accreditations or anything like that as that singular source of truth. We can keep it updated as new revisions of standards and security controls come out, but we also, you know, it's not going to 5 different places for information.
What are your plans to socialize it with both the auditors and the consumers? Or by that, I mean developers, all the people that are on the ground that are going to be audited,
Yep. Um,
because I think that's a key point.
No, it is. And so I'm not sure how your organization works, but our organization gives us 2 ways to do that. And it's multi-factor authentication repositories where we could host stuff like this, that our auditors, they have restricted access to certain artifacts that we have to give them, so, or audit evidence. And this is where something like that would live over time because it is tied to audit activities. So we wouldn't want it in any other folder share, if that makes sense. We would want it, and again, you don't want these details getting out everywhere. So it would have the team, the developers, the engineers, the people with the need to know on that folder so that they would have access to it, along with the audit team and, you know, certain persons from the management team as well.
Yeah, on that question, I was thinking more about how you are working with the development team. Yeah, I mean, you've got to do all that stuff to guard the information that you're collecting. But with regard to how you tell the development team, this is what you really need to do, or
So what No, I hear you, I think a little bit better now. So if I'm understanding correctly, I think my answer to that would be I would actually maybe just take it and pivot it like, so because you could tailor the view of the data, right? So you can save multiple different copies within the same folder structure, obviously, because access control is a thing. But you could say, okay, developers, this is what you need. Engineers, this is what you need. Management, this is what you need. And everybody's view is different, but it's the same data, if that makes sense. So that's how I would go about that. But in terms of versioning, we would have to definitely make sure that this didn't like spawn different living versions of that, which would kind of impact the integrity of the document that the auditors are consuming. So if they had updates, like basically if they had updates to submit or review or in for consideration, that would have to go through, I want to say, a process flow for. I apologize for the glare right now. The sun is like right in my face.
yeah, I mean, change management haunts us all.
But no, really good questions. Thank you so much. We have 6 minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions for me?
I can ask you some of the questions you don't have time to answer at work if you're trying to fill up time, Nia.
No, please no.
Oh. All right. So a question that I do have in reference to this, from the people on the call, if you could just participate really quickly before I have to shut this chat down and let Nia know what of these resources you would like to see. Would you like to see these slides? Can you get them from her LinkedIn, or do you need them to drop them somewhere else? Do you need those other reference points, the places she got her sheets, things like that? What do you guys need from Nia before we go? All right, Nia, I don't know what you can see, but all I can see is that the slides and a link to the website you were talking about. Those are what is being requested.
Okay, so outstanding. What I'll say on that is the slides will be available on my LinkedIn for download. I upload them through SlideShare. So just please allow me some time between today and tomorrow to get those up and accessible to everyone. Along with, I believe these sessions are being recorded. So if you guys like what you heard and you want to share it, that will be available, I want to say, by some point tomorrow. But I just want to, again, just take a minute and thank every single one of you for taking time out on your Friday afternoon to spend an hour with me and hear what I have to say on, frameworks and cutting through that noise and having a better conversation and tying it into, helping drive change and innovation through maturity modeling.
We have one last minute question if you think
Okay.
you can answer this quickly. Have you noticed a significant time difference between NIST or ISO to the SCF you are now using? That is from Chuck McGann. So McGann, sorry. If you think you can't answer that quickly, you could definitely answer it privately. But you've got about 4 minutes.
Okay, so I think they all have their own different time slants. So FedRAMP updated before NIST updated, before ISO updated, in that order, I believe. But that said, with the SCF, and I'm just going to give props to whoever manages that website. Right now, they are keeping up with the industry standard, meaning they will update it for you, and you just have to pull down whatever changed. It is disruptive, but so I don't know necessarily how to avoid that. I just kind of accept it so that I don't get frustrated with it when it happens. That way, when it does happen, I know I can ask or say, like, if somebody is saying, hey, build a roadmap to this, I could say, okay, we need to take at least this many weeks or this many days to reassess because NIST updated or FedRAMP updated or ISO updated. Right. And so you're building in that buffer room for that conversation, but it's not an excuse. It's actually justified. But to me, I know if I had somebody like me on a team, I would want a realistic timeline, but that's how I would drive that. Because we waited, I want to say, over 2 years for NIST 853 revision 5 to get out of draft. That's just a small example. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but just know that yes, I'm aware of it. Yes, the time shifts are different. NIST is probably the slowest to update, but that's why I always just try and keep my leadership as informed as possible. Like, this is coming, this is coming. Okay, this has happened.
Awesome. Thank you, Nia.